When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga, Birth, Babies. Have you ever felt like you weren't quite sure how to handle screen time with your kids? And I'm not talking kids, teenage age. I'm talking even toddlers and young school age kids, not knowing how to manage the screen time, not wanting to face battles around screen time, not even knowing when it's appropriate to introduce screen time, or even how to be a smart consumer about the apps and games for kids. So full disclosure, this was an interesting conversation, and I had quite a vested interest in it because I have 2 kids that love screen time. And one thing that this conversation with my guest, Ash, really helped, I felt like they helped me lose some of my guilt around letting my kids be on screens as much as they are, and to also understand screens in a little bit more neutral way. So I'm really excited for you to listen to this conversation. We talk about realistic strategies for when screen time is causing problems. We talk about the 3 tenets that shape my guests' work. We talk about being, as I mentioned, a smart consumer, what are the effects of video games on kids. And I think you're going to get a lot out of it. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest. So Ash Brandin has been a public school educator for 14 years. Since February of 2021, their Instagram page, The Gamer Educator, has helped tens of thousands of families make screen time beneficial for the whole family. Their first book, Power On, Managing Screen Time to Benefit the Whole Family, is available at the end of August. It's an in-depth guide for caregivers looking to better understand video games and screens, why kids love them, when to worry, and how to use that knowledge to create sustainable, mutually beneficial boundaries around screens. I have to say this conversation really did change my view. And I'm really excited actually to read this book because I think so many of us use screens and then not sure how our kids should be using screens. So I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation. Now, before we get to that conversation, I always love to give updates about Prenatal Yoga Center. So you can check out our latest schedule for our in-studio and online classes, our workshops, our prenatal yoga teacher trainings, all that's on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. We also have a full on-demand library for all of our workshops. So if you can't take them in person with us here in New York City, then you can take the same workshops online on your own timing. And I think you get the best of both worlds there. So check all that out. And then a big thank you. So this podcast, here we are, we're in August, and August is also the birthday of Prenatal Yoga Center. We're celebrating our 23rd birthday, which is kind of wild to think how long this studio has been around and how the community has grown. So I want to say thank you as someone part of the community listening. Thank you for helping us continue to grow and thrive. And with that, I do ask you to help us support growing and thriving by leaving a rating or review for the podcast on wherever you're hearing this from. All right, that is enough about what's going on at PYC. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Ash.
To you, my darling.
No, to you.
The Roses were living the dream.
More champagne for me, please.
Until it all came crashing down.
He got fired.
Fired?
From the director of Meet the Parents.
You're a failure. Women don't like that.
If you need a shoulder or an inner thigh to lean on.
On August 29th.
I just want the house.
We want everything.
Wow.
Stop.
Yes, go!
And see The Roses.
These people.
The Roses. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent. In theaters everywhere, August 29th.
Hey, Ash, how are you doing?
I am well. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. When I heard your podcast, I heard you on a different podcast. And when I heard the topic you were doing, I'm like, oh, I need to get them. I need to talk to this person because I have slightly older kids in most of my community, but screen times and technology is a little squishy in my house. It drives me a little crazy. So I'm really excited to dive into this. So thanks for being my guest.
Well, I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So before we jump into all my questions, let's start with, I would love to learn a little bit about you and what led your interests to video games and then taking a deeper look at how screens and technology impact our lives.
Yeah. So for people who are new to me, my name is Ash Brandin. I use they, them pronouns on Instagram and Substack, where my work mostly lives. I am the gamer educator. And I also have a book coming out very soon at this point, at the end of August 26th, called Power On, Managing Screen Time to Benefit the Whole Family. And my day job, which is not this, is that I am a middle school teacher. I currently am a librarian, but I've taught many things at the middle school level mostly. And I was someone who grew up with technology and video games being part of my life, but they weren't what my life revolved around. They were just part of it. And so I grew up into an adult and an educator who also just saw games as something that could be part of my life and part of students' lives. And I realized more and more that that was sort of unusual, that they often became sort of a scapegoat for things. And in my world, they were just always sort of a neutral thing, just the way books were neutral and playing outside was neutral and everything else was sort of a neutral activity. And so I now am able to take the best practices I know from my educator world and my educator lens, things like classroom management and behavior management and scaffolding and helping with executive functioning and all those pieces that classroom teachers do all day, every day, and combine them with my technology knowledge and kind of perspective on it and help caregivers of all kinds better understand their kids' interest in technology, but also how to manage it in a way that works for everybody in the family.
That's amazing. Can I go off script for a second? Because you said middle school.
Please. Yes.
And I have a middle schooler and a soon-to-be middle schooler. And I'm...
Two.
Well, I have an 11 and a 13-year-old. So my 13-year-old's about to go off to 9th grade and my 5th grader is about to go into middle school. And I find those are, that age group really is just stuck with their technology. So when you're in the school and you have so much knowledge about technology, do you ever want to pull your hair out and be like, oh, Mom, put your screen down, put your screen down? How do you respond? How are you when you're in all that with the middle school age?
So I think it was after my own child was born and I was, leaving a young child and toddler at home and then going to a middle school that I realized this, and now I say it all the time, and it seems to really resonate with people. And it's that when you're working with middle schoolers, you should subtract 10 from their real age, cover up the tens digit in their real age, and that gives you their emotional age.
Oh my God,
and
I love that.
so a 12-year-old is 2 and a 13-year-old is 3. In terms of, I'm not trying to insult them, but in terms of what is happening in terms of all of the feelings and the changes and kind of sometimes what their emotional capacity can be at sometimes because of all those changes. It really helped me to do that subtraction. So if I had my 3-year-old at home and then I went and taught 13-year-olds, I was like, oh, actually, this is like the same. Like it's about different things, but it's the same. And that often gives me a lot of grace for them, especially with things like technology, because I think about, oh, well, what did my 3-year-old struggle with when it came to technology? And do I see similarities with these 13-year-olds who are navigating, maybe being exposed to smartphones or social media for the first time or whatever is going on. So my school, which I think is increasingly common, my school has not allowed phones. I mean, I've actually never worked in a school that technically allowed phones. I've always worked in schools that do not. At least they need to be, often in lockers. That doesn't always happen, but they're not out in class. That's pretty standard. And I think it's interesting because that certainly eliminates some challenges, but it also then, I think, makes it harder to actually educate around the digital literacy that comes up with things like phones and personal devices because, they're not out and about. And so they become less seen and therefore less something that we can really have an impact on in the educational environment. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but it means that, I think it sort of silos the kind of phone-based technology in both the educator's mind and I think students' mind into being like, well, this is not academic and this is not school. And I think that on the one hand, that's good. And on the other hand, it means that sometimes the digital literacy pieces that we might talk about in an educational environment, I don't think kids always see the crossover.
Right.
And realize, oh, actually, like determining whether or not a source I use for an essay is reliable is actually the same set of skills that I need when I'm determining whether or not I should do what this beauty influencer on TikTok is telling me to do. Right? Like determining if something is reliable is the same skill. So there's times I wish we could make more allusions to those things, but I think that's probably something more that comes up in high school. I personally like being able to reference technology-based things, particularly like gaming, in a way that's neutral to mostly just have an in with some students. If
a relatability. So they relate. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And alluding to things and making comparisons. Like, people like educators, we wouldn't hesitate often to connect with a kid if we enjoy the same sport that they do, right? But when they're interested in something like a video game that we have interest in, we might hesitate to do that because we might see it as like not a worthy thing to connect about. But in a kid's world, those are like equally worthy, right? They're both equal, like expenditures of leisure. And I think that validity is really, really powerful. And I think it's also extremely important to be able to try to keep it neutral, because if we start thinking of one activity as like morally superior to another, that really just puts us in a place of trying to minimize one because we don't think it's as good. And then we kind of create a scarcity mindset that can actually make that thing feel more special and off limits, which is probably the opposite of what we want to do. But if it's neutral and we think of it as neutral, then I can allude to it and draw comparisons to it the same way I would a kid's interest in, soccer or something. And that can be really powerful.
And that makes a lot of sense. All right, I'm going to pull us back a little bit because I know that you have 3 tenets that shape your work. Can you share a little bit more about that and explain them a bit?
Absolutely. So, pardon me. I landed on these kind of organically. They came about as I was putting more and more work onto Instagram. And now they really are foundational ideas that I come back to all the time. And they are also very much woven into my book that's coming out. So my 3 tenets are: 1, screen time is a social inequity issue. 2, screens can be part of our lives without being the center of our lives. And 3, screen time should benefit the whole family. And that's actually like kind of the subtitle of my book. So that's obviously really important. So those 3 things really guide the majority of the content that I put out.
Can you flesh them out a little bit more?
Oh, please. Yes. I wasn't sure if I should just dive right in or if I should wait.
No, I have other questions, but I feel like this is this is really the tenet of your work. I want to really dive in and understand them.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with screen time as a social inequity issue. And, was just joking to someone else that I read a lot of like nonfiction, and I read a lot of books that can kind of fall in this sort of like, advice or self-help or philosophical kind of space. And I always roll my eyes a bit when, I'm opening the book because I want the answer to my problem. Right. And instead the author is like, let's have 50 pages of, first setting the stage of all these foundational things. And I'm like, no, just give me the magic bullet. And of course, now I've written a book, and the first thing I did was I was like, we gotta lay the foundation. Right? We can't go immediately into problem solving. And I felt myself becoming the thing that I used to roll my eyes at. But I did it really purposefully because, I just talked about thinking of gaming and screens as neutral as like, say, soccer. And I already know that there's going to be people listening to this that are thinking, but soccer doesn't have algorithms. And in soccer, you're moving your body. And in soccer, you're in person. And in soccer, you're in the sunlight. And like, they're already coming up with all of the reasons that actually that's not a fair comparison. And that proves my point, which is that like, I can have all the data in the world. I can have all the magic bullets in the world, and it will not matter if foundationally we are not first interrogating our own assumptions that we're bringing in around like what weight are we putting on things like screen time for our kids, but also for ourselves. So when we think about the social inequity piece, it's coming up more and more in the last few years, particularly since COVID. And then I think especially in the last couple of years, as everyone is telling us that everything should be back to normal, we're hearing a lot about like, families overutilizing technology. Their kids are on screens too much and they're using them all the time. But what I'm not hearing in those conversations is why. Why is that happening? And we sometimes will hear people say like, oh, well, ask yourself what the screen is replacing. And they mean it in like, if you want your kid to use a screen, ask what it's replacing. But what we really should be asking is, what systemic inequity is this filling? Like, what gap is it filling? Because if a caregiver is handing their child a screen, most of the time they're not doing that and patting themselves on the back and saying, yes, that was the best thing I could have done. Most of the time they're feeling like, oh no, I shouldn't be doing this. I know it's bad. They have too much, but I can't get this done in any other way. And that's the part that I think we do not spend enough time really talking about. It's much simpler and much easier to just blame technology and say we have too much of it without asking why is that? And what are the systemic gaps that are widening that we aren't addressing in other ways? So if we don't have affordable and accessible childcare or after school programming or clubs or before school care, something has to fill that gap. If we don't have 2 caregivers available in the home, then there's only one around, or there's only one caregiver, and they have to make dinner and also answer email and also change a diaper. Something has to fill the gap of their attention. If we don't have safe access to the outdoors or access to a playground, or we live in an apartment, and if our kids are too loud, we're going to get another noise complaint. Those are all things that have to get filled with something. And if we don't have the same systemic supports that we used to, or as accessibly or affordably, then something has to fill the gap, and it ends up often being a screen. I don't think it's good that that's happening. I would much rather that we live in a world in which those gaps aren't existing. But we have to look at, the reason that we're seeing an over-reliance on technology is not because people are lazy. It's not because people are saying like, it's fine. What's another hour? Mm-hmm. It's because oftentimes they are at their max capacity and they have nothing more to give. And that's also true when we look at educational spaces. We saw a huge shift in COVID of all this curriculum go online, and then it didn't really shift back. And so now so much of it is online. So kids are still online a lot. And then we're flummoxed as to why they, want to open another tab and looking at something else on their computer. Well, I mean, what do you expect to happen, right? So all of these are gaps. And if we really feel like there's an over-reliance in technology, then we should be targeting the systemic inequities that are facilitating and causing that over-reliance in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. And I can relate to some of that. I mean, I know that sometimes I need to get some work done and I can't be engaging with my kids. And they're at the age where they could go outside by themselves. We do, fortunately, now live outside the city, but they don't always want to. And I don't always have the fight in me to get them off the screen because I really have to do something else. So I completely can relate to what you're saying. And I can also understand some of the other gaps. So thank you for laying that out. So that was the first tenet. You want to go into the other two?
Yeah, so I won't pontificate quite as long, but yes, the second two. So screens can be a part of our lives without being the center of our lives. There's a lot of very binary kind of takes where we think that our only options with screens are to like open Pandora's box and allow them in any amount, in any like any content in any device, or to ban them completely. And really what we want is somewhere in the middle. We want something that is sustainable, that will grow with our kids as they develop into an adult who will live in a technological world that we can't even truly envision yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we want them to be able to thrive in that world. And that means that we want them to have things outside of that world too, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that to be the only thing. And so if we want screens to be just another part of their lives, like any other part of their lives, a big part of that is by treating them like just another part of their lives. I'm coming back to that idea of neutrality. If I am really thinking of this is like the last thing I should do, and if I use this, I'm bad, and if my kid uses screens too much, they're bad, and I'm creating that scarcity mindset, that can sometimes unintentionally put them on a pedestal
Mm-hmm.
and make them feel really special and off limits. And now that's actually become a source of preoccupation, which is very much the opposite of what we want.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually creating the thing we're trying to avoid in some circumstances. And so if I want it to be no big deal, one of the ways to help that is by treating it like no big deal. And that does not mean that you don't have boundaries. Right? Sometimes I'll say like, well, just treat it like you would treat, bath time or meals or playing outside. And people will say, but those things, like I wouldn't allow them to use a screen as much as I would allow them to play outside. That's fine. I would not allow my child to take a bath as often as I allow my child to go outside, right? Not all things are going to be allowed in the same amounts or in the same conditions, but they can still be neutral in how I speak about them and how I think about them. So just as, I will speak neutrally about, hey, we have to come inside from playing and now we have to go take a bath. That's not the fault of bath time, right? I'm not blaming one thing or another. It's just one thing's ending. We're going to another thing. We'll have a chance to come outside again tomorrow. I can speak that same way about screens, and I might allow them significantly less than I do playing outside, but I can still speak about them with neutrality. So as opposed to, get off that screen. You've been on it too much. It's all you want to do. It's rotting your brain.
So you heard me talking to my son last night, right? Okay. As long as we're on the same page. Okay.
Right. We all, ask me how I know, right? Like, but if I can instead just say, like, we're putting that away now and now we're going to do X. And it doesn't mean I'm not blaming the thing. It's just, hey, we're turning the screen off. It's time for dinner. We can watch more tomorrow before dinner. It's a routine part of our lives, just like other parts of our lives. And that neutrality, I think, helps them not become as scarce, but also shows our kids that, hey, neutral parts of our lives doesn't all mean that they're equal, right? Sleep is neutral in its morality, but I don't sleep in an equal amount to other neutral things in a part of my life. And then
right. I do want to get to that other tenet and say that I would love, we're going to get to 10 and 3, but I do want to circle back to this neutrality, because I do feel like there needs to be some strategies and also ways to avoid the screen time battles. So I want to pick your brain on that. Since putting that out there, that we're going to get back to that. But if you can jump into 10 and 3.
Sure. Will do. Then tenet 3, screens should benefit the whole family. So actually this kind of goes into what you were just alluding to. So if we're talking about, okay, they fill a systemic gap. Cool. Ash, I'm with you. Yes. I need to make dinner. My kid plays the iPad. Got it. Okay. I want it to be a neutral part of their lives. Okay. I can decide, screens are always available while I make dinner. I'm not going to use them conditionally. Like, oh, you got an A, you get extra screen time. I'll just make it a routine part of our lives. Great. But okay, but then my kid still complains, or I don't want it to be too much. If I let them play as much as they want, they'd play all day long. Yes, I completely understand that. And that's where we have to bring in the piece of it should benefit the whole family. So my book goes into this in a lot of detail toward the end about really figuring out how do I make a system that really works for my family. And it has a lot to do with need. What's my need? Because sometimes the need is I need a moment or I'm going to lose it. And sometimes the need is I need my kid to be quiet because I'm in a meeting. And sometimes the need is I need to make dinner. Those needs are very different. And the amount of time and what my kid might do on a screen are very different, right? If my kid needs to be basically convenient and quiet, I'm probably not going to have them play a highly stimulating video game. But if I'm just making dinner, they can do whatever they want, then they might do something else. And if my need is I am making dinner and my kid just gets some time to decompress after school, then maybe the use of screens that I have, like they're playing a game, I'm half watching it while I make dinner, our needs are all being met. That's working for the whole family, right? But if I am having to intervene every 5 minutes because they're yelling or because my kids are fighting or because they're super dysregulated, that doesn't sound like it's working for me anymore, right? Or if I'm letting my toddler watch an episode of Paw Patrol and it like a 22 episode minute of Paw Patrol then ends in a 30-minute meltdown, that is not a good investment of my time, right? That's not a good, I'm not getting out what I put in. So that doesn't sound like it's working for everyone anymore. So if screens should work for the whole family, that includes everybody. And if it's not working for a kid based on what we can observe about them, or it's not working for me as a caregiver or other people in our family, then we need to get curious. And that can still happen from a place of neutrality, just as I might do the same thing if I'm noticing that a transition is really difficult in another part of our day. I might get curious about how to make that easier. I can do the same thing when it comes to things around screens because I want to make it work for all of us. And blaming the screen won't help me tomorrow when I'm facing this same situation. But if I instead go, okay, what can I change? Maybe I can do 5 fewer minutes. Or instead of saying yes to that game, I'm going to say that these 2 other games are available because they're calmer and my kids don't fight when they play those games. Okay, great. That's something I can control. And then we can see, hey, did that work better? Is it working better for all of us?
That really helps. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's dive into it. I had talked about some realistic strategies for when it's causing some problems and avoiding the screen time battles. And I feel like this is something that people can see from 2 to 12-year-olds or probably older. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Chronic spontaneous urticaria, or chronic hives with no known cause. It's so unpredictable. It's like playing pinball. Itchy red bumps start on my arm, then my back. Sometimes my legs. Hives come out of nowhere. And it comes and goes. But I just found out about a treatment option at treatmyhives.com. Take that, chronic hives. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
Okay, we are back. So feel free to whichever one you want to go into first, either strategies when screen time is causing problems, or just straight on how parents can avoid the screen time battles. Because I've seen it with literally from like a toddler to a teenager. So however you want to attack that.
I think, yeah, those are very like hand in hand. I think they are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. So I think it also kind of depends on what you mean by avoiding battles, because I think this is one of those things that might be a difficult reality sometimes as a caregiver to come to terms with. And I definitely have these moments where I feel like sometimes as a parent, I'm like still waiting for the adult to show up. Do you ever feel that way?
Yes.
Where I'm like, when is the adult coming? And then I'm like, oh no, it's me.
I'm the adult.
Like it's me. I'm the adult. Oh no. Right. And there's times where I'm like, oh my God, could someone just show up and just like decide what we're doing? Cause I can't, I don't want to have to make this decision and then deal with however it goes. So when it comes to like avoiding the screen time battle, sometimes I get asked kind of a flip of this question, which is like, when should I introduce a screen? When should I let my kids have screens? And the answer I give, which is probably not the answer people want to hear, is when you are prepared to deal with the feelings that will arise from it, which is, for many people, it's like, well, never, right? but that's true for many parts of parenting that are difficult. And so I understand completely sympathetically and empathetically that this is hard, but I don't think we can avoid a battle. I think that we can prepare ourselves and feel sturdy and secure in the systems and structures that we've put in place. And I think that, like many other aspects of caregiving and parenting, it is easier to do that when we are feeling proactive instead of reactive. And there are many ways that might show up, but I alluded to this earlier, but having screens be a predictable part of a kid's life, by which I don't mean like they get it all the time. I mean, having it be routine and reliable. So for example, in my household, that means it's like the half hour before dinner is one of the times it's available. And also first thing in the morning, my kid wakes up before us. And so that's another chunk of time. And those are reliable chunks of time. And they're serving a need, and it works for all of us. But also, my kid knows that those things are available. And so that gives them a sense of predictability. Kids generally thrive on structure and a sense of predictability, but it also does for me too. So if I am making dinner and I'm like, kind of, just taking my time and being leisurely. And suddenly I'm like, oh, they have 12 more minutes. Like I've got to hustle and get this ready. It also is keeping us kind of accountable to that. And when it's time to turn it off, it's not a surprise, right? It's okay. This is the amount of time we get every day or every time we have screens, whenever that is. And they'll be available again at tomorrow or whenever the next time is. Some families, it might be every other day or it might be on weekends, but it is predictable so that kids know that even though they might be sad that it's ending, it will be available again. They don't have to obsess. It doesn't have to be this, oh my gosh, when am I going to get it again? What if I cry? What if I cry more? What if I scream? Then they don't need to try and push against those boundaries because they know they can rely on it. And if you are coming from a place of having a less predictable relationship with screens, like maybe it has been random or conditional on behavior, if you're trying to transition to something more routine, that will have an adjustment period that can be really hard because the way kids know that they can rely on a routine is by testing it, right? And if you doubt me, the best way to actually see this in action is to watch a kid play a video game. Because what will they do? They'll run into walls. They will fall off buildings. They will talk to characters over and over and over and over again to see if they say the same thing, right? Because they are testing the boundary. Is it reliable? So that they know that they can do whatever they want within those boundaries. It provides a real feeling of safety and security. I know where my boundaries are and I know what I can do within them. And so from the meta view, even when we're talking about screens, we can do the same thing. We set our reliable boundaries, what's available and when, and what behavior around them is okay. And they can do what they want within them. And they feel a lot of power over that. But we're still ultimately in control.
I love that you said,
does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I love that you said, like, if you have the boundaries, it's not a surprise. Because my kids, 7:30 is our screen time off. And every day at 7:30, like, what? 7:30? Really? Oh, I'm like, every day, it's the same thing. And I get the same reaction, like, really?
It's funny. It's so funny you say that because, like, literally, I that exited my mouth. And as I was saying it, I was like, well, actually, like, literally today, I was like, what time is it? But that same thing, I'm so glad you brought that up though, because that's like one of those real life examples where someone's going to be like, okay, but my kids still act surprised every day at 7:30.
Every day.
Every day. And it literally happened to me today. And in the moment I was like, okay, this is information. What is it telling you? And I was like, okay, does this mean like we have like a visual timer? And I'm like, do you need the visual timer out here in the morning? That's fine. I can leave it out here so you can start it, so you can see the time ticking away so that you're not surprised. I can do that. Or can, like, I realize that from where my kid sits in the living room, they can't actually see a clock. All the clocks are like behind them. So it's like, oh, well, do we need to move a clock so you can see the clock? We can do that. But I don't know if I would be able to do that if I was instead thinking of it as like this thing I'm begrudgingly allowing and feeling like a bad parent every time I allow it. So the neutrality also helps me in those moments not just go to a place of like, oh my God, are you kidding? Like it must be the screen's fault or it must be my fault. And instead just kind of take it as information.
Yeah, we put everything on a timer on their phones so that it just shuts off. That way I'm not the one taking it away.
Yes.
Although they do ask, like, can I have more time?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So I know one of the things that you've talked about in some of your other work is the effects of video games on kids. And as a parent who has 2 kids who love Minecraft, I would love to understand this better because I'm a little older. And while I still remember, I'm going to really date myself. We had an Atari. Like, it's like,
oh yeah.
I mean, video games, yeah, I grew up around them, but I just never was super into, although I did have a little stint of Tetris in the college and I could literally close my eyes and see the things dropping. So what are the effects of video games on kids?
Well, depending on what you mean by effects, but I alluded to this a moment ago. And when people hear like the effects or impacts, I think they're often thinking about, the negative of what it might be doing to them. And I have a chapter in my book that's really just devoted to research of really diving in because we've heard a lot of very like kind of headline takeaways from some research, but it often is not really telling the whole story or not with a lot of nuance. And I think really understanding that would probably bring a lot of people's blood pressure down and realizing that some of what they have heard might not have the full context. Because the overwhelming thread of the research on screen time, what it shows overwhelmingly is that moderate uses of screen time tend to produce the best overall outcomes. And moderate use of screens in a research setting often means up to 2 hours per day. And I think a lot of families hear that and would go like, oh, actually, that would be us. Like now I feel maybe a little bit better. I'm breathing a sigh of relief. And different studies have dove into that in very interesting ways. For example, looking at the difference between, what might be statistically significant in terms of a change in someone's reaction or behavior versus how long they'd have to be on a screen for their caregiver to actually notice a difference in their behavior, because those are very different. And that was very eye-opening to me of like statistical significance started to tick over after like an hour and 40 minutes. But it wasn't until they've been on screens for over 4 hours that their adults actually noticed. Is that in a
row or is it dispersed through the day?
Dispersed through the day.
Okay.
4 hours that their adults actually noticed a difference in their behavior over time. And I read that and thought, well, this is very telling because we see statistical significance and think like, oh, if my kid goes 1 second over this magic number, they're going to suddenly like transform into a monster, right? Or the converse, where we might go, well, my kid can't be on an iPad for 45 minutes or they just lose their mind. And that also goes back to getting curious about the information or what we're noticing and say, okay, because not every screen is the same. I feel different. If I'm like reading on my phone and I'm reading an article, I'm going to feel a lot different after a half hour than I would if I was just like scrolling Instagram mindlessly, right? Screens are going to impact us differently. And that's why I don't talk as much about minutes, but instead thinking about, is it working for you all? Like, what are the needs and is it working? And if it is working in a sustainable way, then maybe I don't need to obsess over every minute necessarily.
I actually love what you're saying.
Lost the thread.
Good. I actually really appreciate what you're saying because I've noticed a difference with my kids depending on how long they're watching. That my son will get actually more agitated. Now, he does have ADHD and he's on the spectrum, so he will get more agitated if he's like on a weekend where I'm not as on him about things. And he might, maybe he's hitting like 2 hours in a row. because he woke up at like 9 and I don't have us getting out of the house till like 11 or 12. And he gets like his behavior is different than if it's after school and he's done like 45 minutes or an hour and then he's off to some activity or practice. It's interesting that you're saying that. So it's not necessarily like 2 hours max and I see a change, but I can see it starting to, he'll get agitated. If I'm like, oh, it's time to go, like, okay, another minute, I have to finish this. Where if it's earlier in his playing, he's like, okay, fine. Like it's very interesting. And my daughter's the same way, that she also has a certain limit before she's getting, she gets antsy and then agitated. So it's interesting that you noted that.
Yeah. So to come back to, I'm going to loop back to that, but to come back to what you were asking about effects, you just described some effects. I'm going to come back to that, but also I was mentioning earlier the idea of like within video games that kids test boundaries and and that's not just kids, like anyone who has played a video game. We've all done that thing where we see like, what can I get away with? Right. Like, what can I do? And we do that to give us a sense ultimately of control. And something that video games are extremely good at is igniting what is in the world of psychology called the elements of self-determination theory, which is these 3 components that tend to give us a feeling of intrinsic motivation for something, like doing it because we enjoy it. And those tend to be competence, feeling like I'm good at something, autonomy, feeling like I'm in control or like I have power over something, and relatedness, feeling like I'm somehow connected to other people. And, things that we enjoy doing tend to give us those feelings in some way, not in the same way. It depends on the person and the activity. But, when I go for a hike, I am feeling those things in some way. When I play a video game, I'm feeling those things in some way, not in the same way, but I'm feeling those things and they make me enjoy it and make me want to continue doing it. We hear a lot of talk around video games and dopamine. Dopamine's become this 4-letter word, and I really do not understand it. We don't blame dopamine when someone gets a runner's high, right? When someone comes home and they have gone on an 8-mile run and they're feeling euphoric, we don't blame dopamine, but we do it when they play Minecraft and then they want to keep playing Minecraft. It's very interesting to me. And again, I can already hear people going, but they're moving their bodies and it's not the same. I get it. Totally. But dopamine isn't the 4-letter word that we sometimes might think it is, because if a kid is enjoying something, they're enjoying it because it's igniting some of these feelings. I don't like Minecraft. You brought up Minecraft. You could put me in a room for like a week. I will not leave suddenly being addicted to Minecraft because of dopamine. I will leave that room still not liking Minecraft. It's not my thing. I find it overwhelming. I don't like open world stuff. I just get like frozen with indecision because that's not how I feel in control. But for a kid who might like to hyperfocus, you mentioned some aspects of neurodivergence. A lot of neurodiverse kids like more open-ended things because there's not someone telling you what to do all the time. You can kind of do whatever you want. You're not doing anything wrong when you do whatever you want in those environments. You can hyperfocus to your heart's content. And you can have complete control and autonomy over your world. And especially for kids, that is something that, especially during the school year, they might not feel at all in any other part of their day.
That actually makes a lot of sense why kids are drawn to that, especially my older one. Oh, this is so interesting. Yeah. So how can parents be smart consumers of apps and games for kids? Because I feel like I get requests that I don't always know what they're asking for. So then I have to like stop and look at it and be like, okay, this seems okay. No, this doesn't. So what are some of your suggestions for that?
My first suggestion is to have a go-to phrase or like policy, if you will, that you are going to abide by with your kids, mostly so that you don't feel like you're having to be like a short order cook of approving these things, like you just alluded to, because that's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And nothing would make me snap faster as a parent than being like, I don't want to divert my attention from what I'm trying to do with your current screen time to then look at other things about screen time, right? That would really be difficult for me. So if my child asks for something that myself or their other parent are not familiar with, then we tell them, like, we're not saying no, but we need time to look at it and we need time to, play it or view it or read about it or what have you. And we will get back to you in, X amount of time. And sometimes that's a different amount of time. Sometimes it's like, hey, I need tonight. I will let you know in the morning. But having something that you can fall back on of like, what is the bare minimum that you need to feel comfortable with something? And it's okay if your answer is, I can't make that decision right now, but I'll have time to do that tonight. That's okay. Like we don't need to feel like we have to be constantly doing these things in the moment. Depending on your level of comfort, I think there's generally 3 ways that you can approach content. One is you can download it yourself and try it. And I think that's the one that gives you the most information, but also people are the least likely to do. Because they might say, well, I don't know how to play it. And my answer to that would be, well, your kid doesn't know how to play it either because they've never played it either. So the other really nice advantage to downloading it and trying to play it is that often, especially if it's like a mobile game or an app, that's when all the setup happens. And that's when you have access to things like settings and controls. Oh. And you definitely want to be the first one to be in the room for that one, right? Like you want to be the first one seeing what controls and settings are available, because that also tells you a ton about the game, right? If the first thing it's asking is, can we send you notifications and let us see your contacts list? And who do you know that you can play this game with? Well, that's told me a whole lot. That's told me it's going to bug my kid. It's told me that they can probably play this game with other people, which means there's probably chats available. And now I know a whole lot just in those couple things, because maybe I don't want my kid to play a game where they can talk to other people. Or maybe I only am okay with that if I can like turn it off or turn it to people we know in real life. So I go straight to the settings, see if there's chat settings. If I can't do that granular level of control, then maybe that's a no-go for me. And that actually only took 2 minutes of my time. And now I'm like, never mind. I don't even need to know anything else, because that's a no-go. If doing something like that is too much, which I completely understand, then the other things I would suggest are watch somebody else play it. Like go to YouTube and literally search for the name of the app or game and like getting started, right? Getting started Fortnite, and watch 10, 15 minutes, because that will also probably give you an idea of how is it set up and what are they doing. But it'll also tell you what the gameplay is like. If it's a game where where there's lots of, animated violence of some kind, and that's a no-go for you, then you'll have that information. And the last one, which is probably the most accessible, but kind of gives you the least amount of firsthand information, is look at review sites. I particularly like Common Sense Media, and I use it all the time. They have a very large library of media, not just games, TV shows, movies, books, which I rely on a lot as a librarian. And you can see their reviews of those things, but also what parents and kids have reviewed for those same media, which I find very helpful to kind of compare and see what they have to say. So those are generally 3 ways of, kind of different levels of buy-in or time, depending on what you have in terms of your own capacity. And then if it's things about like making sure that it is safe, like set up safely, I have a whole chapter in my book that is just about kind of a set of guidelines of, no matter what it's applying to, device, app, game, console, here's what to look for and keep in mind to think about the safety that you want to prioritize for your kid, depending on what's important to you.
That is fantastic. And honestly, I all I've done is Google certain games. And then I also just go to the App Store and try to figure out the age and what it's about. But I really actually appreciate the idea, and I never would have thought to do this, I don't know why, downloading it and just trying it myself and seeing the setup. That makes so much sense. That was a game changer for me. Okay, we're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We will be right back. Okay, we are back. So I can imagine there are some new parents, some expectant parents that know screen time is going to be part of their kids' lives, and they might be feeling a little overwhelmed. So what is your final tip or piece of advice for them?
So my my book starts with this phrase that is very important to me that I knew I wanted to start the book with, which is that the amount of screen time that your child has is not correlated with your success as a parent, right? Like the more screen time you allow does not mean you're a worse parent, and the less screen time you allow doesn't mean you're a better parent, or the opposite. And I think a very similar riff on that is your child having feelings, having reactions, having behaviors in relation to technology or screen time is not an indication of your success as a parent or your decision to allow screen time or their capacity as a kid, right? They are allowed to have a hard time, and that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but them struggling with a boundary you've set or the way something might affect them, that doesn't mean that you have like screwed them up irreparably. That doesn't mean that you can't make a change if you need to. And that isn't an indictment on you as a caregiver. And I think so much of our conversations around screen time really often come back to the incredibly high standards that we put on ourselves and frankly also on other people as caregivers. And that if we are not doing the absolute best all the time, that we are failing our kids. And I empathize with that feeling. I think it's a very real feeling. And I think that we would much rather see our kids see us showing them how technology can be a part of our lives, can be fun, can be enjoyable, and instead of just focusing on, oh my gosh, they've had too much and now they're ruined. I think that if we're modeling that for them and they're seeing that balance, that's going to serve them really, really well in the long run. And the last thing I would say, because I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just actually going to say I appreciate you saying that because I do have a lot of guilt around if I feel like they've gotten to too much. So just wholeheartedly, thank you for saying that because it really helps the guilt factor that I don't think I'm the only one that probably is like, oh, I let them watch too much. It's a gorgeous day outside and they just watched an hour. They should have been out playing outside. So thank you. Thank you for opening that up.
Absolutely. And the last thing I want to say, which is really kind of a throwback to something that we were talking about earlier, is, we want screens or tech to be a part of their lives and not the center of their lives. And if you have a kid who seems like they eat, sleep, breathe, think constantly about Minecraft is a common one, whatever their screen obsession is, it can be really hard to feel like you're achieving that. If you're like, okay, we have the routine screen and I hold the boundary and all of that, but seriously, every word out of their mouth is about whatever their screen interest is. I would say to that, remember that if we want that to be one part of their lives and not the center of their lives, we also can use our neutral way of viewing the technology. If we're viewing it neutrally, then we're probably going to be able to notice things in it that could pivot to something else. If I think that playing Minecraft is the worst thing they do with their time, which I'm not saying anybody does, but for comparison's sake, I am not going to notice the things they're doing in Minecraft that could be valuable because all I'm going to do is think it's a waste of time. But if I'm viewing it with more neutrality and I'm noticing that they're constantly checking their inventory and they're looking at how many materials they need. And then they're going out and they're mining more to get more materials they need. I might talk to them and go like, hey, how did you know you needed that? Or I saw you're constantly looking at your inventory. Why is that? They might say, oh, well, because I'm trying to build this thing and I need 8 iron. So I had to go out and mine more. And we might have a light bulb moment and go, oh, wow. So you really kept coming back to your visual inventory of what you had to see your progress. And now we've realized that, they thrive when they have the scaffold of a checklist and when they have a reminder of the components they need to work on a big project. And now we might go, okay. So if we're like chipping it away at a really big project together, how can I make us an inventory like you see in Minecraft so that we see our progress over time? How can I give you a chance to explore and do something hands-on and build without a sense of doing it right or wrong, the same way you seem to enjoy when you play Minecraft? Because we don't want them to think the only way I feel good and in control is when I play Minecraft, right? Because then every time they want to feel in control, they're going to turn to Minecraft. We want them to feel that in other parts of their lives. So if we realize that that's what they're getting from it, then we can still embrace that and say, I'm so glad that you have this way of feeling in control and building and creating. And since you love building and creating, let's try some other way of meeting that need. Because then they might realize, oh, I'm good at thinking creatively. I'm good at engineering something. I'm good at coming up with a design and figuring out how to make it. That's very different than I'm good at Minecraft. So that neutrality allows us to help them harness their screen interest in other parts of their lives so that they can have a more balanced relationship with technology as they grow up.
That is so helpful because, I mean, just in this conversation, I feel like I've already dialed back my judgment. I'll be really honest, my judgment of, of some of these things. And I'm like, oh, I can look at it not like, oh, video games, but like, oh, a little more neutrality. And I also appreciate what you were just saying about it can help with certain skills. Maybe they like organizing, or like my son loves building things and engineering things and making plans. I'm like, oh, maybe he's either applying that creativity to Minecraft or pulling some of that creativity outside into other things. So you actually have shifted my judgment, which I didn't think was possible.
Win!
What a win. I'm excited to read your book. So talk a little bit more. It comes out in August. Remind me of the name and where can people find your work?
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad this has been a shifting conversation for you.
It
And
really has.
if the listeners feel that way too, then I think my book will really resonate as well. So my book, Power On, Managing Screen Time to Benefit the Whole Family, comes out August 26th and is available wherever you like to get books. It is available both in print and also ebook and audiobook format. I am the narrator for the audiobook. So if you enjoyed the tone of my voice, then you can enjoy it for, 6 hours or however long it is. You can also find my work on Instagram at The Gamer Educator. And I also cross-post all my Instagram posts to Substack. So if you're trying to divest yourself from social media, but you still want the benefit of some of those accounts, you can follow me on Substack. I'm also at The Gamer Educator. And that way it gets delivered to your inbox and you can just bypass the social media delivery part of it altogether.
Ash, this has been great. I'm not kidding. I'm excited to read your book.
Thank you so much.
Because I think it's going to pertain a lot to my family. And I think listeners out there, again, anyone from like toddlerhood up, I think really needs to better understand. So thank you for your time and thank you for the book you put out.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I was so glad to talk to you today.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.